and welcome to the One More Word podcast. I'm Marvin Williams, joined as always by the indubitable, inevitable, miraculous, incredible Matthew Aloysius, Octavius Orenthal, Gerard Ryan, the half, the third, and the fifth. I think.
I'm here. I said hello.
So yeah, crazy things, right? So we have a new normal in sports all the way around. And I think the new normal is catching up to the old normal. And today, or this week anyway, and we thank you for listening to us. Again, you can find us anywhere on the interweb, thingy-madoolits, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, YouTube. Just search One More Word Pod. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with people you don't like if you really want to keep them out of your life. We're good at that. So, talking about this whole social media thing today, we're going to talk about it. This week, we're going to talk about social media and free agency and how it's changed the game, even more so than free agency probably could have or did by itself. We're going to talk about the new normal of sports. No more 29-hour days. We're going to talk about what does a number really mean, and we're going to talk about probably something more interesting for some of you apparently is the list. How do you make the list? How do you make the list? Can you get off the list? Is it possible to be paroled or even pardoned from the list? We're going to get into all that today. So Matthew, how you been?
You know what? I'm doing good. This is the third episode of this current endeavor of you and I, and I'm really excited. I've had a lot of fun producing these episodes, and just listening to these episodes is a lot of fun for me as a sports fan to get into these kinds of conversations and engage with someone who's a good friend and someone who I like yelling about stuff with. That's the thing right now in our society is we're all under lockdown unless you really need to get your hair cut or your nails done. Then you're out there protesting like it's 1967 all over again, and the flower power generation has given into glower power. The Simpsons line, I stole it once and I'll steal it again. When you're talking about free agency in sports and how social media has played a huge factor into it, you look all the way back to Curt Flood, the person who instigated free agency in sports. And we talked about him on the old show numerous times. I think we dedicated an entire episode to Curt Flood. When you look at his fight and whether you agree or disagree with the way he got to initial free agency, that's in baseball. That was in the late 1970s, early 1980s. We don't see that integrate into all sports until maybe 1994-95, which is when the NFL truly implemented free agency. And you look, in our first two episodes, we talked about the draft and we talked about building teams and how certain people got to certain places and the building of a franchise. Free agency, now more than ever, is the ultimate double-edged sword for an athlete. Because your favorite topic and mine, Terrell Owens.
Who's on the list?
He is on the list. He is defined as he's the header of the list. He's on the masthead. When you go back 10, 15 years ago, with his issues with Donovan McNabb in Philadelphia, and how he ended up going from San Francisco to Baltimore to Philadelphia, just bopping around like he was Chuck Berry in the mid-1950s going from town to town. You're now looking at people doing Terrell Owens level things in 240 characters. They don't need the press coming to their house because the press is a push button away.
Right. And you think about that. Here, okay, so it's obviously once you ring the bell, it's never going to be on wrong. So the idea now of these athletes who can go out, and they can say, I want to get paid, I want to get mine, I did this, they promised me that, things that we never would have heard about before, unless some intrepid reporter who had a strong insight someplace, and there were sort of guidelines, if you would, about how things got out there. Now the guidelines are I want people to know what I want them to know. And before the league or even sometimes the player or their agent would only let things out targeting an audience, trying to get sympathy, trying to get people on my side, letting people know, look, this is how the other is treating me. This is what's going on. And now, like you said, it's how many characters you get between your Instagram video, whatever, boom, here we go. I'm out there. This is what's going on. I want to get paid. We see the videos of Antonio Brown pretending as though he found out he was cut or whatever via Twitter or something like that. And some of the athletes came on and said, okay, there was no need to stage that because athletes who had been cut before, athletes who had been released before. They talk about you get a phone call. A team doesn't release it in the press first and then tell the player, the free agent, that, oh, we just let this person go. But it's a game. Obviously, Antonio Brown was playing to get more sympathy, to make other teams know, let it be known he was available to other teams without breaking whatever the rules are for that, because those things seem to be fluid according to the moment. You have people who will say, I'm not going to re-up next year. I'm going to go into free agency. They say it early to start the conversation, or, they start right at the end of the season and they make all these things known. And then before you know it, you have this cavalcade of speculation. Where will Tom Brady go? Where will Drew Brees go? Whomever, where will they go? So the reality of the new league, and I'm saying it that way, the new league is how many people knew that Johnny Unitas worked a dock job in between seasons? Not very many. How many people?
No one who bought season tickets to the Colts.
Exactly. How many people were drafted back in the day that never played? Gerald Ford was drafted out of University of Michigan, but a daily gig was going to pay him, I think it was $5 more a week or $10 more a week. I forgot his story. Look it up. So he decided, I can go play for the Steelers. I love playing football, but I make more money working this other gig. I'm going to work this other gig. So granted, we're past that now. We're in the age of where it's not about this job is going to pay me more than this job, so I'm going to go do it. But we're in an age of I can present my case to my 20,000, 100,000, 2 million followers just like that. And I can get the attention I want, I can get what I need, and I can let other people know how I feel about another athlete, another contract, or just see the state of everything in general because I feel like I'm being oppressed. Christian McCaffrey signed a $64 million contract. And most people found out because Alvin Kamara, running back for the Saints, was playing Call of Duty online with his friends at a thing of letting people watch him play Call of Duty. And he basically called an audible in the middle of it. He says, oh, wait, pause. And, his buddy's going, what's going on? And he read out the information of Christian's contract. And you can hear the sincere celebration in his voice. Like, yeah, my guy, whatever, just got paid. I'm next. And I think he even said that to the point, well, I know I'm going to get mine. Then he realized I went one bridge too far. And you hear him kind of backtrack like, well, I don't know about that. My agent deals with that. I don't know about the business. I just play football. But for about 3.5, 4 minutes, you really got a chance to see the inside of a player, seeing another player sign a big contract who plays their same position, knowing that they are more valuable in a way to their franchise than that player was to theirs, and they have a better assessment in the league than that player has, even though that other player is good too. So knowing, okay, if that's what the bar is set at, mine's going to be higher.
And it kind of sets this conversation of access that we as fans, when we were growing up, we had limited access. We're seeing The Last Dance play out now on ESPN as something that was taped 22 years ago that is just being released now. And you talked about Johnny Unitas taking a dock job in the offseason. the whole crux of this for me begins with the 1958 NFL championship game, because that was the game that defined the NFL as a league and developed NFL players into superstars. It's what brought Johnny Unitas and Alan Amici and all of these other players like a Frank Gifford into the forefront, into the limelight. They were on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was the high watermark of American society in the 1950s, 60s, and even into the 70s. When you see that wave beginning to crest, and you see Mickey and it goes back, obviously, Babe Ruth in baseball, but in terms of professional football, we saw that wave crest really high into the 1970s and 80s with the advent of the pro football superstar, because the game was more nationalized post-merger, into the advent of the traditional NFL superstar that we see today. And then with the rise of ESPN and the sports networks, this is something that technology aligns itself with basically four things: news, sports, pornography, and wrestling. Those are the four things that ride the wave at varying levels with the advents of technology.
It's so true. I mean, the first industry to actually become the industry it became was the adult film industry. They were the first to take advantage of the internet, the way to distribute their product and everything else, and there were a lot of overnight, no pun intended, millionaires being born because of that. You're absolutely right. Even going back to film, when film was first invented, and those sorts of things, that industry found its roots pretty darn fast when everybody else kind of lagged behind. That's a great point.
And now with Twitch, with all of these other app platforms, Instagram Live, Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, what have you, that access is more unfettered than ever. And there are some players who, as you said, view it as going back to the double-edged sword. You can use it for an advantage and leverage for sympathy, or you put yourself too far out there, or you curate such an image that, like an Antonio Brown, you alienate yourself from those who could find you sympathetic. And it's all about how you use it and how you develop it and how it's marketing, how you develop a brand identity.
Absolutely right. So I'll ask you, because you're teaching me how to be a fan. So
it's been an 11-year quest.
Yeah, we're still working on it, people. So again, how do you know there's a bridge too far? How do you know? Okay, you go back to Alvin Kamara. In the middle of his celebration, saying he's next. I know I'm gonna get mine. I forgot his exact phrasing, so so I'm sure you can now find that, since everything else is documented and somewhere. And then you can hear the moment where he flipped that switch, mm-hmm. and he felt like a bridge too far. So how does the athlete who might not be as self-aware know I've gone a bridge too far? Now all of a sudden I'm the joke. People don't like me. My fans don't like me. Is it by followers on Twitter? Is it by, what? How can you tell?
You look at if something becomes a trending topic, or if you become a meme, or it's the same. It's the same thing with anything else in media. The more traction it gets, the more possibility for a negative reaction. Right. If Tom Brady went from the New England Patriots to, let's just say, the Los Angeles Chargers, would it have the same reaction as him going to Tampa Bay? If he went from the New England Patriots to the Buffalo Bills, or a division rival? Right. How it depends upon the intent, the target, and the audience. So as a Giant fan, Tom Brady going to the Bucs really doesn't affect me. I find it interesting. It's a reason for me to watch not Giant games all season long and kind of follow the NFL more intensely, because it's a story that I really think is an interesting one. Tom Brady basically going out on his own, going to a completely different coach in Tampa Bay, playing a different type of football with more weapons than he's had since, I guess, 2011.
Yeah, the Randy Moss year.
Yeah, going back to the Randy Moss era, or when he had Aaron Hernandez and Gronk on that same team.
True.
Like this is the
Absolutely. Yeah.
most weapons on the offensive side of the ball. He's got a strong defense, and he's got a coach in Bruce Arians who, in terms of philosophy, is very different. So that to me is an interesting story. Uh, it's always going to be dependent. It's a case by case thing, because if LeBron going to the Lakers, for an example, like I found that to be an interesting piece of his story and something that I would want to cover, because it's LeBron, the biggest basketball player in the world, going to the biggest basketball franchise to help reclaim its dynasty after completely falling on its face.
Yeah, and I'm sure that stimulus money is going to help them out too. Oh no, they had to give it back. Never mind.
No, they gave it back. They luckily the Bus family aren't that ignorant. They're not running it like Uncle Roscoe's Waffle House down in Passaic. They're not doing it that way. So.
Who doesn't like chicken and waffles in your Lakers? And it's funny that you would even say that, because thinking about that, right? Okay, in all fairness, the Lakers do meet the criteria of what this particular grant for the stimulus program for the COVID-19 situation. They do meet the small business criteria. They have less than 500 employees. They only have so many people working. Even though we think of the NBA as seasonal, I should say year round. They're actually a seasonal league. But I just can't imagine a person sitting at their desk going, we should apply for that. Our organization is only worth, what the Lakers are worth, billions of dollars?
At least $1 billion.
So, yeah, we could use that because, hey, now I can turn on the lights in my office during the day. So in their defense, they do fit the criteria. Just such a bad look, but, you got to pay for LeBron some kind of way. And and I think you absolutely said it right. So, okay, so with the NBA, we can look at players as personalities. With baseball, we can look at players as sort of their individual prowess being respected regardless of what team they are on. We can still separate the two. Ernie Banks, Ted Williams, etc. In football, the story matters for a select few. And let's take the quarterback out of it, because the quarterback is always the answer to the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So removing that, let's look at this. You might care about a running back, maybe, but we don't really have running backs like that in the league anymore. You might care about a wide receiver, insert your favorites here, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Ocho Cinco, whomever. But at a certain point, you care about them more as their story. When it comes down to the game, the only thing you worry about is my quarterback standing up and did we score more points than the other guys? So it's interesting how the narrative of the football player, even in social media. Okay, so J.J. Watt, defensive player, great defensive player, elite defensive player, but has a presence that some people only got introduced to him when he started doing the charities he did for Texas during the storms, mm-hmm. and what he's doing now for COVID-19 relief. Drew Brees. Now, I know he's a quarterback, and we say we leave the quarterbacks out of this. He has a presence because of his community work outside of the team that, and Drew Brees is the kind of guy, you would look at J.J. Watt and say he's a football player, right?
Yeah.
How many people see somebody like Drew Brees and go, wow, that's a football player?
Yeah, my man looks like he does my taxes.
Exactly, and does them well because he's always on point. So, this idea of what do my athletes mean to me? Again, we talked about this before. The sport they play matters, yes, not just from the business side, but also from the social side. But when those players take the field in football, you know them who they are because you knew them already, and because of the number on their back. If, for instance, when LeBron changed jersey numbers, when Kobe changed jersey numbers, it was a story, and it was a story for about 47 seconds. When Jordan wore his 45 when he came back from baseball, a story for 47 seconds. And then it was just as big a story when he changed back to 23. Same thing with LeBron. He goes back to 23. All these things. Those are stories for a little while because we kind of, their number. But we recognize them maybe because they're not wearing a helmet, maybe because we recognize them more as a personality they are over the sport, whatever the reason might be. Whereas in football, if Tom Brady changes his number or any other player, and again, we should leave the quarterbacks out of it. My fault, my bad. I'm putting a nickel in the jar right now. Most players that don't have the kind of profile that makes you go, wow, I know that person outside of the NFL, we could care less. Some people probably couldn't even tell you, even some of the famous players, some people who are not the diehard fan, that 30% couldn't even tell you numbers of older players, the Johnny Unitas or whomever. They might know Dan Marino, maybe just because of a movie. But how many people really know Walter Payton, Gail Sears, Jim Brown? Their number means what it means to those of us who followed or know of that athlete and what that person means to the sport. But at the end of the day, you sent me a pic of Joe Namath wearing his Chargers uniform. What he had, number 19.
Unitas.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, Unitas. Yeah, it's this sort of thing that we associate with players and their numbers. It's about jersey sales. Let's not get it backwards, right? Mm-hmm. But the identity of the player and how we side with or side against the player usually has nothing to do with the number they're wearing. Usually has nothing to do. It has everything to do with how we perceive that person to be, right? So you get somebody like Todd Gurley and Clay Matthews. They let it be known their discontent with the LA Rams. I'm sorry, I was getting confused. I almost said the Oakland Rams.
The way it's going, they might end up being the Oakland Rams.
Exactly. So they let their discontent be known. How do we find out? Not through a news report, not through whatever Todd Gurley tweeted out. Okay, LA, give me my money. A lot of people jumped on Todd Gurley. Hey man, why are you doing that? That's low class. People are out of jobs now, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Todd played it easy. Then Clay Matthews came out and said, "You're doggone right, brother. Give me my money too," because they were both out after they were released by the Rams. They were owed a certain amount of their contract, and we don't know the specifics of the contract. We don't know if there was a certain time frame upon their release. It was supposed to be deferred. We don't know, whatever. What we do know now is after Todd Gurley came forward and said what he said, after Clay Matthews came forward and said what he said, other athletes who were also released by the Rams also expressed discontent with not being paid on time. And now Clay Matthews is filing a lawsuit, trying to get the money that's owed him from the Rams. So those are the things that we would not have known before. And, millionaires or whatever you want to call them, going after what they're going after, it's not about the money, it's about the principle. They were owed this. Do you think if those athletes decided they didn't want to show up on Sunday and not play and still get paid, you think would they get their game check? I don't think so. So the contract, the paper that it's written on is valuable to a certain extent. So these guys saying, hey, I want my money, I want to get, but them saying that the way they said it, using their social media platform, is huge. We knew about Tom Brady's contract situations and in some cases his discontent with pushing money down the road to help out the Patriots so they can sign some people to help them, and it didn't happen. How do we learn about that? Those are the early days of Twitter. Those are the early days of the machine that all of a sudden, like you said, gave us access to what was available to these guys and what they were thinking about themselves and their contracts in the moment when it's going on. We're never going to go back.
No, we're through the uncanny valley now, and I've got two things I want to really hit before we continue. First one is with the advent of social media, the rise of the internet, the rise of websites like SB Nation, who pay me money, and Bleacher Report, and just the continual growth of regional sports websites, sports blogs, and just different websites, and even Twitter journalists, which are a thing now. There's more press than ever. There's more opportunities for reporters to find inside information, and there's more clutter than ever, which allows for reports like for people don't know what if that's actually true, if Tom Brady was pissed or not, or whoever did what until the actual person says it. But you start to believe specific sources because they get it right most of the time, and they're mostly playing for the bigger league teams. If I had a report that I reported on my Twitter account that Gronk wanted to fist fight somebody in the parking lot because he didn't get the ball on a go route, they may not believe me. But if Adam Schefter said it, they'll probably believe him. And when you talk about the superstar player in the NFL, is it because now more than ever, there's more parity in the league? There's no super teams like we're seeing in the NBA. We're about a decade and a half into the super team era, the people playing together, the compiling players and building out rosters.
Right.
In the NFL, we're seeing less elite teams and more competition because we saw the Rams go to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. We saw the Falcons go 3 to 4 seasons ago. They can't make the playoffs now because next year there's a team that's better, that's faster, but we have those consistent. We have the New Orleans. We had the New Englands. We had these teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers that are consistent and put out excellent ball clubs. But that's coming from the era before that. That's coming with the players that you saw in Madden 2004. You had Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, even to a certain extent, Russell Wilson, or these different players from different teams from an era before this. Now, any given Sunday is a real thing. And you'll see a Christian McCaffrey pop off or a Travis Henry pop off for a season. And then some of them may fall off the map completely. We look at these like a Jameis Winston. He was the number 1 draft pick. Now he may be the 3rd quarterback on the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, that should be a fun quarterback room. I can't even imagine the conversation between Drew Brees and Jameis Winston about quarterbacking. Just one guy is an artist who is a tactician who takes it serious, and the other guy is Jameis Winston. So
and a guy who's still getting blasted for allegedly robbing crab legs 5 years ago. And to further that point, Teddy Bridgewater, the guy who carried water for Drew Brees last season while Brees was injured, putting up seemingly MVP numbers after being a revelation in Minnesota, suffering a debilitating injury, and then having to bounce between the Jetropolitans and then the Saints, and now is in a starting role. And you see that in the NFL, especially at the quarterback and running back position. Mm-hmm. The conversation of what is an elite player is a season-by-season conversation. When you're behind center, there's a bigger conversation now. It's not about longevity. It's about impact within a season. Because Jared Goff and Todd Gurley in the 2018-19 season had impact and took the Rams to the Super Bowl. Now, a year later, people can figure it out. There's less people who are like the 4-3 or 3-4 defense who sustain throughout history, and more people who are playing like the Wildcat or the 46, who are very era-specific, which is like the NFL before, I'd say, 1986. When the game got more wide open, anybody in the NFC could take each other out, and the AFC was a grab bag because most of the teams sucked.
But think about how many of the rules have changed, right? So look at, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about our seminal games in history.
Mm.
You look at Lynn Swann and that catch they always show from Super Bowl 10, I believe it was.
Yeah, it's Super Bowl 10, I believe.
I mean, he could have filed battery charges. you, you see him being pulled, yanked on, jersey going one way, him going the other way. The guy's falling down, pulling him down with it. He still managed, like the athlete he was, to grab Bradshaw's catch. And if you trust me, when I'm talking about this play, if you go Lynn Swann Super Bowl catch, they show it in every highlight reel. I mean, it just makes me sick. But the reality was today that would have been interference, spot foul, moving forward. That game is gone. That game is never coming back.
Oh, hell no.
So much like how people are looking at, and you talked about The Last Dance, you look at the way the NBA was played then and the way it's played now. Why? It's a lot more violent. We'll just say it. It's a lot more violent. And the reality of going down the lane in a playoff game against the Celtics or against the Pistons or against whomever, somebody was touching floor. Usually multiple people were touching floor. One of my favorite videos, as much as I disliked the Celtics at the time, Kurt Rambis going in for a layup. Kevin McHale comes up, basically shivved the guy. Kurt Rambis goes one way, his glasses go the other way, his jersey goes another way, his pants goes another way, and Kevin McHale, before the whistle is blown, you see Kevin McHale turn to the ref and said, "He fouled me." I love that. It was, when they say it was a grown man's game, it was a grown man's game, and that's how they played. But today, my goodness, how many ejections would they be? How many punches were thrown? Forget that, today you throw a punch and you miss, you're out. They threw punches back then and they connected. They still got a chance to play. It's yes, the game is different and we can go back and forth on that all day. But again, let's talk about it. Who are the personalities who we remember and why do we remember them? And how many do we recognize and see outside of sports? Imagine if there was Twitter and a way to communicate back in the day when guys talked about who didn't like who liked what. The way the Major League Baseball players now are talking about how they feel about the Astros and what they did. And now what people are saying about the Boston Red Sox and what they feel about their cheating scandal and what's going on. Guys are saying, you took the opportunity for a championship from me. And in those sports, it's much more difficult to get there than, let's say, the NFL. And you hit it right on point. Any given Sunday, this one team has an opportunity to win. 1985, the Bears, considered one of the greatest teams in NFL history. They're on their way, undefeated. They go play. I think the Dolphins were last place.
They weren't in last place, but they were not at the same level of the Bears, especially defensively.
Exactly. I mean, who was? And so what happened? The Braves. The Bears go down, and they get it handed to them by this team. And a conversation that I'm going to assume that it's public, so I'm just going to say it. Mike Singletary tells a story about that game. And he talked about how upset he was and how he went after Ditka. He basically said, "What are you doing? We're not even trying. We're running our shell defense, our shell offense, blah, 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 going on. And he said Mike Ditka turned to him. And in that voice of his says, "When you're a grown man and you coach a team, then you can tell me what I'm doing about coaching." Now, Mike Ditka, not a little dude.
No. he was a tight end back when tight ends had to catch, block, and possibly mug somebody at the 50-yard line.
Exactly. And Mike Singletary, very much not a little dude. But guess what? Even as head coach, Mike Ditka says, "I'm the coach, you're the player. Do what I tell you like I told you." And it's just is what would be said today? What would the players be tweeting out about the game? It's that access, that dynamic of what's going on. But to your point, any given game day, I shouldn't say Sunday, any given game day in the NFL, we can have the Jets beating the Patriots twice in one season. I remember those days like it was 2010. Oh, that's because it was 2010. Never mind. Sorry to all my Jets fans. So but it's interesting how, and we talked about earlier, how the bell will never be unrung.
No.
The way free agency now plays out, social media is tied to it, and I'm sure there are contracts that say you cannot be on Twitter, you cannot be on this. I'm sure they're starting to say that now because the litigious aspect of what that means is always behind what's actually going on. But players just find another way. That's all. Players will find another way to connect with the people who like them, and that's the way it is. I'm going to ask you a question, though, and I'm going to ask our listeners a question. Again, this is One More Word Pod, again, available on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, YouTube. Please give us a check. Please give us a subscribe. Please give us ideas about what you want to hear about. We'd love to talk about it. If you want to hear it, we're going to give it to you because that's what we do. If you follow the players on a team and the player on the team gets traded or leaves, do you stop following that player because they're no longer on your team?
It depends. Like I'm not an active, like I got to follow the third leveled offensive tackle for the Giants. But I do speak with very hardcore Giants fans and very hardcore sports fans. And it's, if you're not on my team, I really don't care about you.
And it's so funny you would say that. One of the exchanges I had with a gentleman on Twitter, whose Twitter handle I cannot remember, and as soon as I do, I will make a point of mentioning, giving some props in the show. When Robbie Anderson wasn't re-signed and then went to the Panthers, he didn't make a big thing about it, but he said, okay, you know what, I'm not following anymore. Good luck where you go. I'm like, dude, why you not following him? He was one of our better receivers. He was our best receiver, whatever, then say what you want to say, right? And he was like, well, no, he's not on a team anymore. I'm not going to follow him. I'm out. And this guy, to his credit, gave me a list of players who he followed, who he really liked when they were on the Jets. But as soon as they left the Jets, unfollow. And it just shows you that passion, the separation of that passion of the hardcore fan in that small in that 30 percentile of people who can tell you who's the emergency quarterback on a team. Who can tell you who's the emergency punter, they can tell you these. They can tell you who is the tight end specialty coach. Those people on Twitter will go out and find these people, and you might be an NFL coach, but let's say you're a running backs coach. Most people couldn't pick you out of a line in Publix. However, that hardcore fan will know who you are. It's kind of like being any coach in Alabama at the University of Alabama. Everybody's going to know who you are, no matter what you do. You're going to be like Bill Curry. You're going to hold, when Bill Curry was coaching the Alabama Crimson Tide, he tells a story when he was opening up this door for this for this more senior lady who was, she had a walker, the old school one that had the tennis balls on the bottom, and he's holding the door open for her. And she stopped in the middle of the door, parked her walker right on his foot, and starts talking about his defensive choices that he used against Tennessee the week before. And he realized, I might not be in this job too. This guy played in the first Super Bowls, would have played in the first 4 Super Bowls, I believe, in a row, had it not been for a trade to New Orleans that kept him off the field for Super Bowl II. Really? but those are the hardcore fans. And now those hardcore fans who are social media capable can go find that running back coach, that linebacker coach, that tight end coach, that scout, whomever. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, and have a little more insight to the team and interaction. And not that it's intended on the person they're following's part, but the reality of it is that's what fans want. And now more so than ever, all these leagues, NFL, NBA, everything, they're all 24/7, 365.
Mm-hmm.
There is no longer an off season.
No.
You know, we talk about signing days and trading days and tampering days and this. We talk about this stuff now, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. Now it's a season from January 1 to December 31st. It's a season. Rinse and repeat next year because of the advent of social media and all of the other things that matter. And again, here on One More Word Pod, being a season 24/7, is there now a new normal for how the coaches work? Is there now a 29-hour workday? Is that now a myth? Is that now a situation where coaches will go home, spend more time with their families? Will we have shorter off seasons? Will we have situations where players won't be sequestered for months at a time before a season in order to get ready for the season? Will those things change? We'll talk about that in the next segment here of One More Word Pod. You mentioned Gale Sayers, and I think Gale Sayers' value is kind of lost on like a lot of listeners who might not be aware of. Before there was Barry Sanders, before it was O.J. Simpson,
it was
Gale Sayers. And he was everything Jim Brown was not. He was the fast.
He was faster. He was quicker. He was
exactly. And then I once had a chance to see him when he was talking to players. This is when I was trying to make a practice squad. And he came in to actually speak. It was actually with the I was trying out for the Vikings. He comes in and he was speaking to players because Coach Denny Green had brought him in. And he said, somebody asked him, how did you? Because we were watching film of him back in the day when he was doing his thing, and they said, Mr. Sayers, how did you go about deciding which way you were going to go? Because he had this thing where he would change directions in midair like Walter Payton would do. Like Walter Payton would leave his feet and he'd be going northeast. And when he come down, he's going south. And it's just like in full speed. It's like, dude, 0 to 60, forget that. 0 to 80 in 3 seconds. He was just amazing. Walter Payton was, obviously. So, but Gale Sayers was that before there was Walter Payton. So he said his thing was when he always saw guys tackling in what they call tandem, which is actually an interesting word because that's what's used in basketball whenever we train guys on the two-man drill. We call it tandem. He said he knew he had the first guy beat already. And we're thinking, what? Yeah, I said the first guy was in my peripheral. I was looking at the guy behind him because I was trying to decide which way should I move now to get him off his weight so I can go the opposite way. So in his mind, he already had the first guy beat. It was just done. It was a done deal. He had the guy beat. So he was looking at the second guy and just his thought process. And he actually walked us through some of the videotape of his runs. And he wasn't even looking at the videotape. You would swear it was a parlor trick. Oh yeah, blah blah. Okay, here, right there, And he was calling the guys' names like they were still playing. So and so, blah blah blah. Now what you can't see here is so and so is on my peripheral right here. He's coming up from the upper right hand side. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do this because I know he was left handed. So I was going to blah 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 this. And he's walking, and it's just like, and it's stuff that was so far over our heads in terms of his concepts about how he was going to go about. And talk about before there was the highlight reel of Barry Sanders, it was Gale Sayers. You knew 1, 2, 3, 4 times a game he was going to do a run, and he might only get 5 yards. But that run from side to side and how he got guys flipping and falling on themselves was going to be something amazing. So that just, he's a guy that should definitely not be lost in the antiquity of the game here. And welcome back to One More Word Pod. I'm Marvin Williams, joined as always by the incredible producing and production and the person, Matthew Alovich, just like Tavius, Orenthal, Gerard, Ryan, the third, the half, a fourth, and a fifth.
Thank you. That's nice. That's the nicest thing someone said about me in
since
decades. Prison. Yes.
So, and yeah, who doesn't have a great prison story? Because there's that one time. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's not the place for that. So, speaking of prison, 29 hours a day. That's what it used to be for coaches. That's what it used to be for people who were, we talked about running back coaches and linebacker coaches and et cetera. And a lot of A lot of these cats were making 20 grand a year, maybe, some cases less. A lot of them were even intern. They were coaching for free just for a chance to become a coach to get a paid position. So for those of you who might not know, the only coaches you see really getting paid, the head coach, the offensive coordinator or the OC, the defensive coordinator or the DC. And yeah, that's it. Everybody else, everybody else, they're getting a salary, but they're not getting, when we think about the player salaries, they're not getting anywhere, anything close to that. And a lot of those cats you see coaching, they're not getting paid at all. They're getting a per diem, they're getting a stipend, but they're not on salary. So they're basically a contract worker. But it's all about the dedication. It's all about who you see at the job, when you see them at the job, how you see them at the job. So NFL coaches, notoriously known for couches or cots in their office space. They finish up working at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. They take a nap. They get up. They watch more film, make more plan for the next day. They get home at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. They up again, back at the facility at 5 or 7 in the morning. Take Bill Parcells, workaholic, and look at video of him when he's in season. When he was a head coach, he looked like he was one pretzel stick away from a cardiac event that he wouldn't be able to come back from. Had dark circles under the eyes, back kind of slumped, perpetually stressed. And then when he would leave and he'd take a radio job or a television job or just in general, just do something else, all of a sudden he looks like he's 22 years old again, and he's on the back of a Harley going, "How you doing?" And no other person can I think of such a stark contrast of in season or on the job versus not on the job person than Bill Parcells. Classic story. Jon Gruden, as coach of the Oakland Raiders, would show up to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, the Oakland Raiders owner, Al Davis, had a loft, a full-blown loft, apartment space above the practice facility. So there are stories, a classic of people coming into work at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Al Davis is already up, drinking his whatever, and talking to people as they come in, greeting everybody as they come in. And then when they would leave at 11 and 12 o'clock at night, he'd be in the same spot. So one day, Jon Gruden shows up, and it's 4:15. It's not 4:30. I'm sorry. It's 5:15. It's not 4:30. It's 5:15. It's 5:30. He walks in the office. Al Davis goes. He says, "Hey, hi, Mr. Davis." Al Davis goes, "A little late today, huh?" Now, let's peel back the onion on this story, because I believe the story. Let's peel back the onion on this story for 1 second. The coaches who their entire being was wrapped into what was going to happen the 2.5 hours, 3 hours on Sunday before it became Sunday, Monday, Thursday. Their lifespans, as it were, come on, let's think. If you read anything about Vince Lombardi going into Super Bowl 1 and 2, they were the considerable favorite. The NFL was the big boy league. The AFL was little boy league. They were, and the Packers were the considerable favorite. How little sleep Lombardi got, how much he actually threw up.
Didn't he get a letter from George Halas? It was either George Halas or Wellington Mara who wrote Lombardi a note basically implying the entire fate of the league is on your shoulders.
No pressure.
Oh, what a jerk.
Okay, let's look at it, though. Look at what the NFL was at this particular point. The NFL had, at that particular point, had already fought off 2 other burgeoning leagues when we get to the 60s. The AFL had lasted the longest by far.
Yeah, because there was the initial AFL and then the AAFC, which rose out of that AFL.
Right. But this version of the AFL, not only was it not going away, look at the money people who were owning and running AFL teams. They were comparable to the money people who were in the owning the NFL teams in the 50s.
They had more money if you look at it. Like
That's true.
You look at the initial owners of the NFL against the initial owners of the AFL.
Yes.
The Rooney family, the Mara family, the Hallises, the people that owned the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those teams, they were small to mid-major business owners. Lamar Hunt's family owned a shipping company,
right.
basically owned the railroads. Bud Adams was an oil magnate.
Exactly.
Sonny Werblin was the biggest talent agent in the world. There were a few weird also-ran owners who initially owned the Jets and owned the Raiders, and Al Davis was basically somehow being able to make money and fought his way and cajoled his way into majority ownership of the Raiders. But the AFL was playing with way more money than the NFL was at the time, and that was just because of the coffers each individual owner had.
Absolutely. And this league was not going away.
Mm-mm.
This AFL was not going away. So a letter coming from one of the old heads of the NFL saying, look, man, we're happy for you, but you better win. You understand what I'm saying? Because, hey, I'm just saying. So that hardcore reality of what it meant for these people. Now, you want to say it was an extension of college football and the passion went into college football. We can go to the sociologists, to the sociology of this all day long, right? But look at what it means for the coaches that followed.
Mm-hmm.
The another line from a head coach who said, "Oh, you guys think you're going to work 9 to 5 or 9 to 3 and go home and be with your wives for supper? Yeah, you won't be coaching long. I see you at Walmart later." Statements like that being made because, hey, if you weren't here 29 hours a day, you're not going to work here. And what we have found out now with this quarantine happening in the United States, well, all over the world, but here in the United States, and how the NFL is still trying to find a way to keep itself alive and keep itself afloat, is that is not indeed the case. And we talked about it 3 weeks ago. We talked about how seeing players at home who are about to be drafted with their families, coaches at home with their families, the owners, that's what, how many things can be done via this new technology that we talked about in our social media free agency segment. Though, that sort of reality has now, unfortunately, took this, but it sort of kicked in the door to how these leagues can operate. The birth of Madden, the football game,
mm-hmm.
was a coaching tool.
Yep.
It was John Madden, brilliant mind in football that I know people talk about him and everything else, but in my heart, I still don't feel like he gets the respect he should get for what he means to the game. Not just, and my goodness, just on so many different levels. Just sort of he's in his way, almost our Da Vinci. So you see, and John Madden would never let Jason Bourne borrow his car. But anyway, you see how he took that teaching tool to train quarterbacks and coaches and whatever. Here's how you design plays. Here's how you do what you do. And now it's become, whether it's Madden tournaments and PS11s and all this, whatever else is going on. I still have a PS3, so, I'm way behind. I got the PS3, the PS4 came out 2 weeks later. So anyway, there you go. So, this reality of how teams can now communicate, how teams can now teach. And in some ways, it's going to change the dynamic of the athlete they go after. They're going to go after the athlete who can, oh wow, really learn a playbook. Oh
mm-hmm.
wow, really has good study habits. Oh wow, can really process the information and then execute the information on the field of play. And you can say baseball is a thinking person sport. I am so sorry. If you give an NFL playbook, just the playbook, let's forget about the physical attributes and what you need to be to play in the NFL. And yes, Matt, I can throw you a ball and you can catch it.
Not well,
Right?
but I
Right?
could try.
But right, okay. But the reality of it is, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
However, do you think you can block me?
No.
I mean, just basic blocking technique. People don't even recognize how incredibly difficult that is to keep another 300-pound being from passing you, and or to make a hole so another 300-pound being can get by you. All these sorts of things that go on, but it all starts with understanding where you need to be and how you need to be there. And that's what the playbook represents. They don't just say hut hut and all of a sudden it's like in the backyard. You go deep, you go this, I'm going to run around. That's not so. Football is a very complex and difficult sport for a lot of people, a lot of very intelligent people to comprehend. But now with the new normal, now with the potential of having shorter physical off seasons, but more virtual off seasons with the technology, you're going to start seeing those teams, let's say like the Pat Riots. I'm sorry, I know they're the Patriots, everybody. Just kind of, I'm a Jets guy. Okay, just stay with me. Just stay with me on it. But you can see teams like that even having more success because they're going to get the cats who can not only mentally process the information and do what need be done to learn the book, but also physically execute it come Sunday, Monday, or Thursday. What makes Tom Brady Tom Brady? Not because he can throw a ball out of the stadium, not because he can get on his knees and still throw the ball 60 yards. None of that. It's because of how he's able to process information and execute that process on a level no one else can. He has the best of all the worlds. And quite frankly, to be honest about it, you take a look at him physically now, he's in much better shape and seems much more capable than he did than it was 15 years ago even.
He had to teach himself how to be an NFL quarterback. He was behind Drew Henson, who was a second day draft pick for the Dallas Cowboys in 2002, I want to say, because he decided at some early before, leaving college to play for the New York Yankees in their farm system, and the Yankees looked at him as a blue chip prospect.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about playbooks and tendencies and you're talking about Madden, with this new kind of off season, with this new time, and looking at the effects of injury and CTE and the larger effects, would it behoove the NFL or even teams? We saw how the Sloan Institute, the Sloan MIT convention every year, NerdCon essentially for sports analytics, turned people who were very interested in the analytics of sports into general managers. It developed the Daryl Morey type of general manager in the NBA. Could we see NFL coaches or NFL assistants or NFL teams calibrate Madden or work with an EA or a Take-Two Interactive in developing a modified version of Madden to where you can develop a playbook, where you can develop, different scenarios or different things to teach a player how the game is supposed to flow or how your playbook is supposed to play out in real time? Is that something that could be tangible?
I think not only is it tangible, Matthew, I believe it's actually being done. I believe there are still people on the cutting edge, and I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to Madden again because he's just on the mountain for me. He still works with developmental leagues and developmental parts of the NFL to improve things like basic blocking.
Mm-hmm.
And back when we started paying more attention to CTE and brain injuries in football, he was the one who, in one of his camps, ran sessions where nobody got down in a 3-point stance. Everyone stood up, no helmets, to run basic plays, just to see how it would work out, how it would play out. Now, I listen. Okay, I hear the yelling. Okay, you know what, Barry and Idaho, just slow down a minute. I know we're men wear leather helmets. They have 4 teeth in their head, and all their sisters are named Mary. I get it. But as the times have changed, if we start seeing, okay, for instance, the extra point got moved back from being hiked from the 2-yard line to now the Basically, it's not a 35-yard field goal for the extra point.
Mm-hmm.
So people basically extricated a chicken from their behind when it was going to happen because, oh, that's so different. That's so crazy. That's so, oh, I can't believe it. And guess what? Now nobody talks about it anymore because the game is still the game. All those other things that happen. The only thing that I can't let go of is I hate those monochrome uniforms that the teams have to wear every Thursday night because it looks like it just looks like an ice cream truck threw up. But other than that, people will adapt. People will still watch the game. The forced 2-point thing. All these other little changes that happen. You know, in Major League Baseball, right? When they first broached the idea of interleague play, how many people went outside, started banging their head on the sidewalk, saying the end is nigh? Guess what? Who cares anymore?
Yeah.
Now there's going to be a DH, a designated hitter, in the NFL, Lord, in the National League, and they're going to move it up a year early because of how they're realigning the teams to play this season.
Abolish the National and American leagues.
Yes, and guess what? People are going out and say what they're saying about it, but at the end of the day, my favorite phrase: who will care because we'll have the game.
Mm-hmm.
What I wish the hardcore fan would learn to do is just to adapt faster to what their league is doing. And I believe that would release a lot of the tension. I mean, I get it. It's the internet. Everybody's supposed to be outraged. I understand. But the idea of these leagues will do whatever they need to do to survive and to keep themselves relevant. You talked about this on the social media side, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put it eloquently. Do what I need to do to make sure I have the followers, have the clicks, have the whatever, have the people on my side to like what I do. Whether they get a chance to see me do it or not is irrelevant. The fact that they like me because of what I do all those other hours in the week, other than those 3.5 or 3 hours on Sunday, Monday, or Thursday as an NFL football player or whatever sport I play, is fine. They're going to, people who watch the game are going to like me then anyway. I want the people to like me the other times too. I want people to know about me the other times too. I want people to see me the other times too, because I want to keep my brand out there. Mm-hmm. So these leagues are going to change. And guess what? Coaches now can't say, I got to be at the office 29 hours a day. Coaches are going to, some coaches say, well, say, okay, let me get this straight. I can be an NFL coach and follow my dream and work 29 hours a day, or I can go work for an analytic company and work from home, be with my family, make more money all year round. See where I'm going with this? Because...
And we will be fielding offers, by the way, if any of these analytics companies would like to pick this up.
100%. 100%. So this point, I think, has created this seismic shift in how these leagues, all of them, will now operate. Eventually, you have to put feet on the dirt, feet on the turf, feet on the court, or whatever to play the games, yes. But because now leagues are 24/7, 365 from January 1 to December 31, if we go by the Western calendar, because of that, do you care if your franchise does have, do you really care if your team has 3 months of spring training or 3 weeks of spring training and then when the season gets started? Because that's the only time people pay attention anyway. Do you care if they have 4 or 3 or 17 preseason games, or do you care when the season?
Speaking as a fan, I just want my team to be the best prepared possible with the least amount of wear and tear.
And again, see, you brought it back to where most people feel about. I already know my quarterback. I already know the people who are the standards on the team are going to be there every year, and I want them. And magic words, Matthew, healthy. Mm-hmm. I want them healthy,
especially when you're adding another week to the season.
Even more so. So okay, so now that So now there's going to be an extra bye week. There's going to be a common bye week.
Mm-hmm.
The simple answers are often the hardest to execute because people are so change averse.
And here's a question. Speaking of change averse, we were talking about people playing Madden online, the rise of Madden as a Twitch game or as something that is, there's tournaments, there's a big streaming community for Madden for pro football games. At what point do you see an NFL team signing a coach because of their success rate in building Madden or a general manager in building Madden teams, and why will it be the Las Vegas Raiders?
Because Al Davis is going to say, I like that guy. He's fast and he's smart.
Because our only conspiracy theory here on the show is that Al Davis is not dead.
Oh, he's totally kicking it back. Him, Rihanna, and Cardi B are hanging out, and I'm just sorry. He's thumbs in the air the whole nine. This is what's going down. So, okay, so let's go back to the sabermetricians in Major League Baseball. And the first real one that we really think of is how Billy Beane, correct?
Yeah, Billy Beane and Bill James are the two. And, he was the general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. And then he ended up running DePodesta. Right. DePodesta, who ended up running the Browns for like 45 seconds.
Right. So I believe, or I feel, that this change of I'm going to go out now and get a person who knows the game from instead of X's and O's, the ones and zeros. See what I did there? Who can, under ideal circumstances, which, by the way, is what everybody does anyway, this player, we project him or her to be this because of this, and this. That's all you're doing when you're building a team in the perfect scenario in Madden, right? You're putting a team with the projections of what this athlete is supposed to be given this, and this. So is it that big of a stretch just because they don't live in a van down by the river and only have 2 pair of members only sweatsuits to wear every day jogging suits to wear every day because they're broke? No. The idea of the league changing to where people who are more into the numbers, the metrics, and those things are now calling the shots. Hey, I don't think we're that far away at all. As someone who how many coaches have, I'm going to say the word, 0 football experience other than being a coach? And I mean, a lot of them coming into coaching late, working another job. I decided one day I wanted to be a coach. I went and I was a grad assistant here. I was this, I worked my way up. And granted, talent is talent. So if you have talent, it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's laying cement or coaching in the NFL. If you got talent, you're going to be good no matter where you go. Yes, that's absolutely true. So what you have now doesn't necessarily relate to what you will become and how you will become that because of the amount of work that you put in. How many players are drafted in the first round who never get a second year in the league in any sport, not just NFL, but in any sport? And how many players are unsigned, undrafted free agents who have 20-year careers and go into the Hall of Fame? So I'm getting at, it's not about how you get there. It's about what you do when you get there. And if you have talent, if you have the work ethic, you will do whatever need to be done to be great at your job so you can be noticed, appreciated, and then talent always moves. Talent always moves. So I don't believe we're that far away from that happening at all. That it's probably even closer than what we think now. We have women coaching in the NFL. How long before we see a woman head coach in the NFL? Oh my goodness gracious. Can you imagine how many people's stacks are going to blow off the top of their head when that happened? And guess what happened 2 months after that, 3 months after that, 3 years after that? No one would care. It'd just be another, it's just that the change of that, oh my God, this guy's a general manager. He never even played the game. Oh, they won a world championship. I love that guy. I always love that guy. It's what it is, man. It's what it is. And it's how things play out because you might not want to change, but guess what? The world, the universe around you is changing every single second. So you change and adapt and you catch up and you move on, or you don't. And the next thing you know, we're talking about you. You're those guys who ran those banks, right? Back in the 90s. We don't need online banking. We want people to walk in. We don't need no stinking ATM machines. Next thing you know, our bank is broke. We need ATM machines. We need a website. And I got a nephew who plays a video game. He could probably make us a website. And it's just what it is. You stay and you change, you catch up, or you just don't make it.
Pretty much.
And speaking of not making it,
it is time for the list.
The list. So for all of our longtime listeners, you know about this. For all of our new listeners, here you go. So over the course of our career, we have determined there are some people who need not be mentioned by name anymore because they have done something so egregious, something so against what the spirit of sports and the spirit of community and sometimes the spirit of society stands for, that we can't mention this person's name. Now, every now and then we'll mess up. Every now and then a name will come out. Well, I'll say the name and I'll say, okay, that's my bad. Here's here's a nickel in the jar. So so we're going to give you insight into this, and we'll do this from time to time to let you know. So when we say somebody, we say that this person who shall not be named, you'll have an idea of who we're talking about. So
and Marvin is keeper of the list. You shall roll it through, and I will add in my notes as we go.
There we go. So one of the names on the list, as a matter of fact, I think it's one of the first of our first three names that made the list, was the owner of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes.
How? Why? Let's present the case. Why is he on the list? Because when he took over the team, he got rid of one of the most hallowed coaches of all time, Thomas Landry.
In the most backward-ass way you can get rid of a coach.
And he did it by having the previous owner do it first because he didn't want to be the guy to do it. Now, imagine if there was social media back then, right? Oof. So now imagine him saying that. How long before that would have gotten out? That somebody from the old ownership group would have said, guess what? Yeah, we might have let Tom Landry, because for some reason saying fire Tom Landry just doesn't even feel right.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute.
Exactly.
And you can make the argument that Tom Landry's style of coaching, it passed the NFL in the late 1980s, heading into the early 1990s, had passed him by.
Right.
He was dealing with ownership. It was Clint Murchison was the person who sold the team to he who shall not be named.
Right.
The team, and I believe it was the Bright family who owned it before then. I might be wrong, but I'm trying to remember the original owners of the Cowboys, and my mind is blanking because you can only think of that one person as the owner.
Exactly.
But the Dallas franchise necessarily wasn't a rich franchise.
No.
And heading into after riding the high of the 1970s, and dealing with, the rise of the AFC as the dominant conference in the NFL.
Thank you, Pittsburgh Steelers.
And Oakland Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
The NFC in the 1980s completely revitalized, but it was due to innovations made in the AFC, Coach Walsh. And you see the rise of big defenses, and you see the rise of different teams being able to populate themselves in the draft, and it was through innovation. Now, Tom Landry created the 4-3 defense. So when you talk about innovators, Tom Landry is one of them. But when he's being outpaced and outpaid by other teams that are able to pay other players, pay bigger salaries, kind of keep pace, and this is he who shall not be named is the third owner of the Cowboys and has held the team longer than I believe any other owner in the history of the franchise.
Right.
There were a lot of you can make an argument to why Tom Landry deserved a second chance.
So I'll ask you now. I've only spoken to a few people in direct personal conversations who worked with Tom Landry like this.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that if ownership would have come to Tom Landry, the new ownership, and by the way, if you say Jerry Jones, you got to say Jera, and only give him one aura. Don't give him two. Give him one because he doesn't deserve two.
Emphasis on the
That's right, on the Do you think that they could have pulled him in the office or gone to him and said, okay, you know what, coach, this is where we are with the team. This is what we want to do. We'd like to give, we're telling you this because we want to give you a chance to step down. We'd like to keep you on with the team as an advisor, which I think he ended up doing anyway, eventually at some point, or something. But we really want to make a move on the field to another coach. And then in a professional, kind and considerate and respectful conversation, do you think Tom Landry would have said, all right, that's good, let's move on?
Yes. I feel like Tom Landry would have done that, especially because of the person that would have been coming in.
Exactly.
Jimmy Johnson.
Mm-hmm. And with you, please don't lose your thought, and with you, because of the description that still brings tears to my eyes of Tom Landry's last day, packing up his office, everything in his office fit into one box. And the writer and I wish I can give him credit, I will find it, I will post it, I will do whatever I need to do. But the writer who told this story, he was walking through the facility, he looks over at Tom Landry's office, the door is open, it's always open, and he sees him putting his stuff in a box. That's how this writer found out Tom Landry was being let go. And no fanfare, no thank you for what you've done for us, no nothing, just one of the greatest minds and creators within this league that was blowing up, by the way, in all kinds of ways, that all of a sudden now this person is putting his stuff in a box as if he's just been fired as a manager of Walden Books. That's a bookstore that doesn't exist anymore, by the way, and being shown the door. Or not even shown the door, just, pack your stuff and go. That crushes me every single time. And I cannot look at any of those games. I cannot look at anything with him in it and see that and think about that's how it ended for some people's career should not end that way.
Definitely. And Tom Landry, here's what I'm going to say about Jera and the Dallas Cowboys. There was no coach aside from Jimmy Johnson who was going to set that franchise up for success.
Right.
Tom Landry, and this is not a knock on Coach Landry at all, but Tom Landry, with the personalities in that locker room, he would have traded Michael Irvin halfway through his rookie season.
You think he would have traded him? You think he just would have just left him in the back of a trunk somewhere outside of West Texas and just came back and said, I don't know where he is.
He would have drove him like 15 miles outside of town, dropped him off at a local gentleman's establishment, drove to a church, apologized, and then went on his way.
Exactly. I mean,
because if Tom Landry was willing to let Hollywood Henderson go, who was the best player on the Dallas Cowboys at that time in the 1970s, and walk away from a guaranteed dynasty and leave Danny White behind center, mind you, and Hollywood Henderson was on the defensive side, but continue to push forward with Danny White, who the fans hated because he wasn't Roger Staubach.
Exactly. Naval Academy, go Navy, beat Army.
When you look at it like that and you see Troy Aikman, who had issues with Barry Switzer, who ended up becoming his coach.
Right.
Emmitt Smith, who was at the time the best football player on the planet, but knew he was the best football player on the planet.
And would tell you.
You had Michael Irvin. You had Charles Haley. You had Leon Lett. You had, who was the slot receiver for Dallas that ended up going to Atlanta and completely burning out of it. It wasn't Charles Haley. Charles Haley was on defense.
Right.
Who was that second receiver?
You know what? I see this face, and I even see the number, and I can't even think of the name.
I see
all. So we're going to get that, and we're going to post that for you too.
But you look at that, and I think Tom Landry would have lost his mind.
Yo, 100%. 100%.
If you don't have Jimmy Johnson there, the ends don't necessarily justify the means, but you can see throughout the past 26, 27 years that Jerry Jones, Jera, throw a nickel in the jar, has run the Dallas Cowboys. It has been what he wants over the needs of the team. And that is why Bill Parcells flailed out. That is why Bum Phillips' son flailed out. That is why every single coach, Jason Garrett, has flamed out. Mike McCarthy will probably flame out because the needs and wants of ownership have superseded what is best for the team.
And you talked about this earlier when you talked about the Giants and Parcells. You talked about how many more championships would they have had if ownership could have gotten out of the way.
This was a conversation you and I had via text. I was watching the two Bills 30 for 30 documentary. And it's infuriating.
So again, and again, your point is so sublimely made. It is the idea of if ownership can get the ego out of the way and let the coaches and the players do their thing, you have that long-term success. But when you flame in, you flame out. The way that Tom Landry was released, again, no social media, right? So nothing. When Bill Parcells was let go from the Cowboys, very same owner, we have viral internet footage of Jerry Jones at some bar getting drunk, saying that Bill Parcells ain't blank. He ain't nothing. He ain't nothing but a piece of whatever. And that stuff went everywhere within 24 hours.
He took Vinny Testaverde to an AFC Championship game. He took Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler to the Super Bowl. He took the New England Patriots with a young team and a young quarterback using the detritus of his Giants coaching staff.
Yep. Which gave us Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Tom Coughlin. Oh my goodness.
Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel,
Pete Carroll.
It's insane. It is insane to me that someone like that, and you look at Jera as a businessman for the National Football League.
Yes.
Undoubtedly one of the greatest assets as an owner for the league in the history of the National Football League.
Yes.
But when you look at assets to the league as an owner and assets to the team as an owner, he and Art Modell are in the same class to me. Because they helped. Art Modell was a big driver in the merger. He was a big driver in the initial TV deals in the 1960s. But no one else has set the standard for dislikable owners than Art Modell, the original. Why can't I think of his name right now? The owner of the Colts who moved them from Baltimore to Indianapolis. And Jera. Those three owners, they're all in the same class. You can even say Chaim, who owned the Patriots and had that huge scandal in the late 80s and 90s.
Yes.
You could put all of but Chaim was a nothing owner. He kind of blew himself out of the water and necessitated an ownership move to the Kraft family. But him doing that set up for one of the best owners in the history of the NFL. But he had ego problems with Parcells as well.
Yeah, and if you like a massage, you like a massage. So, too soon? Maybe I shouldn't. Yeah. So there you go. There's your first introduction to the list. And as we go throughout these podcasts, as we move through, we're going to give you more and more people on the list, as well as we will give you redemption stories, people who were on the list and who maybe worked their way off the list because they showed us something greater. Again, we thank you so much for taking your time to listen to us here at One More Word Pod. Again, I'm Marvin Williams. Matthew Aloysius Octavius Orenthal Ryan, Jr., the third, the half, and the fifth, and the three quarters.
Coming soon, the TuneIn and the iHeart app.
Yes, right now you can get us on YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, and
Facebook and Apple Podcasts.
Thank you. I almost said it's a dating website, and I realized, no, we're not on that. So
our Mi Gente files, our J-Date profiles will be coming up real soon. Don't worry about that.
Real soon. We thank you for taking the time. We thank you for taking your time. Please stay safe. Please be well. Please love and hug all of your loved ones, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.